Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show. On this podcast, you'll learn from professional players, coaches, and executives from all over the world and see the court in a brand new way. And now, joining you courtside, your Gen Z host, John Hartophilus.
Hey, Keaton, what's going on?
John, I'm doing good, man. How are you doing?
Excited to have you on. This is going to be so much fun. I'm just really excited to go into your entire story. There's so much in such a short amount of time to get through with, your career, really, like all these stops and all these experiences in the last, 5-6 years. It's incredible talking to young people that are really making strides in the industry. So this is going to be a lot of fun.
I know we've talked about it before. I'm a fan of the show, listened to it many times. So excited to do it.
Always awesome to hear that. So, of course, right? Everyone probably jumps into the NBA experience when they talk to you, right? Like everyone always wants to know about that. But I'm curious about the start of it all. Where did this passion for the game, where did this love for what you're doing now maybe start when you were younger?
Yeah, so I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, man. So I kind of grew up with hoops in the blood. My dad is from England and played semi-pro ball in England. So like when I was growing up, of all sports, he could kind of teach me. It wasn't like baseball. It wasn't American football. It was basketball. So that was kind of the big one I played. Eventually realized I'm not going to the NBA, right? Like a lot of people. But I guess initially after like kind of playing in high school and all that, I was going to do architecture in college. Didn't go that route and figured follow the passion some more. So I did sport administration, University of Cincinnati. Never really got anything there like basketball wise, but I did all kinds of different internships just to like get the hours, right? Like I did stuff in NASCAR and Division III football, just trying to build the resume. And then eventually, yeah, I got a job with the Spurs and everything kind of started to open up and doors started to open and the career got going.
That Spurs thing definitely opened up doors, and we'll talk about that. But before that, you mentioned like these kind of, it maybe sounds like kind of all over the place. Like it wasn't really, it's like right, NASCAR, maybe not basketball. But one thing that I saw jumped off the page was when you worked when you did the John Calipari basketball camp. I think that's awesome. I saw that on your LinkedIn because the reason that stuck out to me so much is number one, because obviously it sounds like a great camp. And number two, one of the best pieces of advice I've gotten from this show was Nick Lay just telling me to play the basketball camp game, as he calls it, which is go to camps, show your face. Like 89% of life is showing up and being there and getting involved and having energy. So if you could do that, like you'll be great. And then obviously talent is what get you the A+. But talk a little bit about that experience for you and maybe working some camps and learning basketball that way.
Yeah. That was my first little hint of anything basketball wise. Like I said, like I wasn't a manager or anything in college. I was never like chosen for that stuff. So I was trying to get experience however I could. Found this John Calipari camp and they were like, hey, if you can get yourself to Lexington for the weekend, you're in. So got a hotel room and was there at 6 a.m. staying till, basically midnight. Amazing to just see like, this is how coaches talk. Like this is the nomenclature. This is how they like teach sets or teach plays and teach the fundamentals. So that was like an amazing kind of first step to just open my eyes to like, this is how coaches talk. Like this is how the basketball world talks. Huge step for me for sure.
Oh, I'm sure, right, from the coaching side, X's and O's, right, the on-the-court stuff, that must have been huge. But sports management worldwide is what a lot of people call, right, the leader in a lot of these off-the-court stuff, which is maybe more of what you're doing now. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? Maybe how that shaped up what you're doing now?
I took 2 courses with them. Those were both like post-college, I guess. And this is post-college, but before the Spurs. So I was still trying to like, teach myself like how to be a scout and salary cap stuff so that hopefully if a job does come knocking, everything's not like foreign to me and there's not all this like catch up kind of period. So SMWW, man, they were amazing at just kind of like Dean Oliver taught one of the courses, guy Mark Workentine, who was with the Knicks at the time. I believe he's with the Thunder now. Like he taught another course and they were just like an open book to just pick their brain about how do you, evaluate someone's jump shot? How do you evaluate, their body language and things like that, little things to pick up on. I'll tell you the most impressive or just like interesting story, like remembered from taking one of those courses is Mark Workentine was talking about like parents, like you can judge a lot on like if someone has a tall mom, tall dad, and then like hair, like if they have hair on their arms, hair on their legs when they're like 15, 15, 16. Maybe they've already maxed out like puberty wise, or maybe they still have 6 inches to grow. I was like I would just never think of that
That's
stuff.
crazy.
Like if I didn't like take those courses. So without a doubt, like those have played a big part in just me developing as my career has gone on, and being able to like pull little tidbits from those courses to help me out in my work.
So cool. I love the example. So I appreciate you for giving it for sharing that with us, because it really opens your mind as to, okay, something that might, when you hear it, you might be, okay, that makes sense, but it's something you never would have known if you weren't there and you weren't experiencing that. And I'm sure there were dozens of hundreds of other examples of little things that you learned like that, but that one stuck out to you. We spoke a lot about maybe the build up to getting to that first maybe eye-opening job with the Spurs. How did that one play out? Because that, right, coming out of college, that's obviously what a lot of people listening to this show are looking to do in the sports industry.
Before the Spurs, I was living in Phoenix, Arizona. Had gotten a job in spring training with the LA Dodgers, actually. It was just like a part-time kind of deal. I realized it's time to put all the eggs like in this basketball basket. So drove like the 3-4 hours to summer league in July. Met this guy who was kind of like, hey, it's like a legacy business. You don't have a famous last name. You don't have an uncle that can help you out, but you do have all this marketing experience. So see if you can ball up all this marketing stuff in NASCAR and the other sports and land a marketing job with an NBA team to kind of check off that, that part on the resume. So that's what I did. Reached out to every team and was like, here's the experience I do have, if you're interested. And of all teams, the Spurs kind of answered and rolled the dice on me. So it was like a business side job, marketing, corporate sponsorship. It was funny because it was like, as soon as, a couple weeks in, I was like, let's update the LinkedIn and put the Spurs on there, man. Like people were hitting me back that I'd messaged 3-4 years ago. It was crazy. So huge step in, me trying to like eventually get to the basketball upside. And without a doubt, like San Antonio, man, will always have a place in my heart for sure.
I can imagine, right? That must have been a huge few months for you. And I'm experiencing that now with MSG, where you kind of change that on LinkedIn. LinkedIn starts popping just a little bit extra once you have that NBA team on there, which is really cool to think about. So, I mean, you were telling us a little bit of marketing. When I read the title being a game operations associate, I assumed that had more to do with like basketball ops side on that instead of like the business side. Can you explain like maybe what that might have looked like?
Yeah. So the game ops side, which is misleading, I guess, it was more, I guess, how if you go to a game as a fan and you're sitting in the stands, kind of the visuals that you're seeing as the game's going on.
Awesome.
So like how everything operates outside of the play, like on the court. So things like booking national anthem singers, booking like the Red Panda for like halftime stuff, like all that is kind of what encompasses like the game ops department in the Spurs organization. So yeah, it was more on the business side, but it was, like we were working every home game, things like that. So it was definitely cool to like be in the arena for sure.
That's so cool. A lot of my friends are doing that in the student association program at MSG, the same kind of concept. What was maybe because you were talking about maybe the kinds of performers you guys would get. What was the coolest event you guys did maybe during your time there? That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I know it's a tough one.
Yeah, that is. Oh my goodness. I know I guess it didn't actually happen, but I know for a while my like supervisor, whatever, we were trying to get the like R&B guy Khalid to do like a national anthem because he's like from El Paso or is from Texas, something like that. I believe like something like his rate was too much, so we couldn't get him. But that was cool for like 2 weeks. We were like trying to get this like guy that was blowing up and like I was on the radio and everything, but didn't pan out. But that was one where it was cool because like I know who he was. Like I was listening to him on the way in. He's still big, so that was kind of cool for a little bit.
Yeah, Matt, right. That's got to be the excitement of like going home, like, okay, wow, like I'm actually playing a hand in this and things are actually happening. People that I know are coming to this thing. That's got to be really cool just in terms of excitement, thinking about that. From there, though, I mean, you were still at the same time, I noticed from your LinkedIn, but it looked like you were doing some scouting stuff at the same time as the Spurs thing. So please tell us a little bit about that and maybe what that looked like in doing both. You must have been pretty busy.
Yeah, man. My whole, I guess, thought process was if I network like crazy, if I'm out hustling as many people as I can, and then I'm also like skill set wise trying to like build like a scout skill set. If I'm doing all this, I just kind of had blind faith that something would finally happen, like basketball upside. I was working like 9 to 5 business hours with the Spurs and would come home and try and have 2 to 3 LinkedIn calls like set up. I eventually like through SMWW, found this guy called Berman who has this company called Net Scouts, who it's essentially like an apprenticeship program. So you like pay a fee and then like you get into games, D1 games, you're scouting live, you're taking the shorthand, you're learning all that stuff, and then like kind of reporting back and getting, like getting some information on like how you can do this better, how you can evaluate this guy better. So there was always like, I guess, like a master plan of like, okay, I'm going to do this job with the Spurs, but also I want to be ready, if like a basketball ops job comes around, I want to be ready. So yeah, I mean, I was driving up once a week to UT home games, watching like Mo Bamba. I was going to like the small D1 schools, mid-major, low-major stuff right in San Antonio, trying to be in the building and like scout players, learn how to take like the shorthand, and when you're trying to watch like 10 players live all at once and get tidbits on all of them all at once, that was daunting and like was something that I had never done before. So it was amazing to just do that, go to games, be on like press row, and then get feedback at the end of the night.
I can imagine, right? You're getting this crash course and seeing all that. And I realized that when I went to sports business classroom in Vegas, there's just so much. You always think it's okay, it can't be too hard. I watch basketball all the time. Like I see it all the time. But that's different between watching it as a fan and watching it like as a scout and actually looking for things. Much harder you're playing catch up most of the time as you're getting ready. After a while, you start getting good at it. So how long did it take you to maybe figure it out to where you felt really comfortable sitting there? You weren't really playing catch up as much.
I would say once we got to like conference play, I guess, if that makes sense, once we got through like the non-conference schedule, like all the guys at Texas, like I kind of knew really well. I knew like how they were kind of play. So, like I've always heard like a good what's it called? Like way to go about evaluating players is like watch them for 4, 5, 6 games. You can kind of get like a good feel for them. I guess a good like rule of thumb. And so once I probably saw 4 or 5 games of like this guy Matt Coleman and like Bamba and different guys at Texas, and I got like a good feel for him. So then come like the conference games, the big stuff, I could really focus less on their jumper or less on ball handling and more on like how are they interacting with coaches when they're taken out of the game. Like little things like that. When they get, called for a block and they wanted to charge, are they up barking at the ref, or are they, how are they carrying themselves on the court? So yeah, probably about conference play is when I got a good feel of like, okay, I can maybe do this one day.
Those intangibles you're mentioning are in some cases more important than the actual numbers you're seeing on the court because of how players carry themselves and how they're gonna move on and how they're gonna carry themselves to the next level, which is huge. But you do actually do a lot of stuff with those actually on the court numbers. I know you do a lot of stuff with analytics and stats, and that's kind of what you progressed into after your time with the Spurs. Were you always maybe like dabbling in that? Did you always have an affinity for the numbers and the analytics, or was that something that came once that opportunity presented itself to you?
It was always kind of interesting to me, but I was never like a big coder like on my own time or anything like that. So it was for the most part like me trying to teach stuff to myself, like teach Python or like art like to myself, and then figure out, okay, how can I like pull this shot chart or like shot coordinate data from NBA.com/stats, like how can I pull it and put it and make my own visualizations, things like that. It was always interesting, but there was definitely like a lot of just grinding and like teaching it to myself that I had to do. I just, like a lot of things, like I wanted to get to a point where if someone was interviewing me for like an analytics job, I could be like, hey, this is not foreign to me. Like I have a good little grasp of this. So there's going to be no catch up period for me. I can come in right away and be an asset.
Awesome. And I've been hearing about the role you kind of had just through Nima nonstop every day. He just started this week, which is pretty funny in terms of like coincidence. But what was that? Were you in Secaucus? Maybe just because like I kind of heard about his story, but maybe how did that actually look like for you? Were you going to Secaucus? Were you working a lot of the night games? Were you with maybe one team over the other? Like, please tell us maybe how maybe the first few weeks or months, maybe what your responsibilities looked like.
Yeah, so man, that job was amazing. I actually was approached by the league to get that job. I had interviewed a couple of times with this guy with the Cavs. I had made it like 4 or 5 rounds, was down in the final 2, didn't get the job, but eventually like we had built up such a good relationship that he was like, hey man, I'm gonna pass along your resume. Hopefully it works out for the best for you. Probably a month and a half later, literally I had no basketball ops experience, and I got this email that was like, hey, would you be interested in working like as a stats guy, as like a experimental rules guy, with the G League? So that was obviously like an auto accept kind of deal. And then, yeah, once I got to the league office and started doing that stuff, like it was cool because I hadn't watched the G League a ton. So I was like learning about these, diamonds in the rough type of players. There were old guys that like you kind of forget about, are still in the G League grinding. Like I remember my first year, like Hakeem Warwick had just signed with like the Minnesota G League team. And like he had been in the league like forever and he was trying to like make a comeback. So that was cool. And then outside of the stat stuff, like the experimental rules that they do in the G League was super interesting to like work on. Like the coaches challenge when I got to the league office, like the coaches challenge hadn't been put in yet, but it had actually been in the G League for like a couple years. So like first few months, like we're just sifting through like notes and stuff from the past, because at the end of the day, the coaches challenge, right, is just almost like it makes the game longer. So we're trying to figure out like how long should they get to go to the monitor? How long should the refs be able to like talk over the play? So like things like that, like the research and development of the coaches challenge was amazing to like be a part of. I know we talked about it too, like this way, like they'll try weird stuff in the G League too. And there was this one that we tried my second season there called it was like a weighted free throw that was purely trying to like speed up the game. So the idea was you get one shot regardless of the attempt. So say you get fouled on a layup, you shoot one shot, you make it, it counts for both points. You get fouled shooting a three, you get one shot, it counts for all three if you make it. So that was cool. Just to like, is this gonna happen? Is this gonna work? How does it affect guys like free throw percentage? Cool to just be a part of like the operational side of things for once and less on the business side. The G League basketball ops, man, with those guys were amazing to me. Amazing gig for sure.
That free throw one's always fascinated me because it's always because there's obviously the numbers where like guys shoot better on the second free throw because they actually get the first attempt in, so their numbers go up a little bit. But also it's worth more. That's a super interesting conversation having. You obviously were in all those. That's got to be a lot of fun seeing all that take place. So you were with the G League for I saw those 2 years. How did the WNBA get thrown in the mix though? Was that was it also in the same office and kind of both happening simultaneously?
Yeah, so the W, man. So my first year after the G League, that summer, we kind of had the opportunity, like if you're going to stay kind of in the city around the area, like you could work essentially the same job for the WNBA season over summer. So I did that same thing like I was doing with the Spurs. Like I was working the games at night, like that whole build up into the game. Like I was hitting up people on LinkedIn, trying to build a network. Eventually got connected with the director of basketball ops with the Liberty. And so that was kind of how that gig started. But yeah, I was essentially just doing the same thing. And it was really just purely to stay in the building. I'd had like that first G League season under my belt to kind of learn how you like stat a game and how to like use their program, their software there in Secaucus. And then did the same thing for the W, just to stay in the building, keep rubbing elbows.
So I have to take it back a little bit because you mentioned LinkedIn again for you've mentioned it a couple of times. A lot of the guests that I have on this show, they've been using it more recently, right? It's like, and for me, the last year and a half, LinkedIn's almost my only social media platform because that's where all 300 plus episodes have come from is through LinkedIn. But when you were using it in 2014, 2015, 2016, when you were getting out of college, what did that look like for you? Because I know maybe what the current landscape of LinkedIn's like that social media platform as it is, but you're using it as recently as 2 years ago for when you got the WNBA thing. You're using it 5-6 years ago when you were first trying to get your foot in the door. Like how have you seen like your approach to a change, or have you seen LinkedIn change maybe?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I remember when I first started in college at UC at Cincinnati, that was like day one. What they were harping on. They were like, it wasn't super big back then, but they were like, hey, there's this thing called LinkedIn. Like it's quote unquote like Facebook for like the business world. I don't even know if that makes sense, but that's how they were like marketing it. And it was like a no-brainer. Like sign up. You'll meet people in different industries. You'll meet people, and you can kind of figure out different paths people have taken to like reach where you want to reach. And so back then it was definitely not as there wasn't as much like interacting as there was now. Like now, like people will post stuff about like when they get jobs, post stuff about like their personal life from time to time. There wasn't really any of that. I feel like, I mean, this was 2013 when I was like, fresh in college and learning it all. And it was purely just like Google Los Angeles Lakers, see who comes up, click connect down, on every single one, and shoot them a message and hope they get back to me. That was it. So yeah, it was definitely a little different back then. Just being able to like see what's going on in people's personal lives, see like how happy like someone is when they finally do get that foot in the door gig. Like it's cool to see what LinkedIn's kind of turned into almost 10 years later.
I love that, because really I only hear about it from people either that used it super long time ago or that are my age right now and like using it a lot right now. That's how I do everything. So to hear you talk about how you used it back then and you still use it that's just a little light bulb in my head. Like, you know what? I got to ask you that because I'm curious. Like, I don't know what LinkedIn was like back then because I was in middle school or high school at the time.
Yeah.
So that's pretty funny thinking about that. But going back to maybe what you're doing now. So you had those awesome jobs with the G League and WNBA, touching like these whole leagues in transformative spaces, right? Seeing all this innovation take place. One of the biggest leagues in terms of innovation is, of course, the WNBA, and you're now working with the Liberty. What was that like for you? Maybe that switch now to being back on the team side from the league side, in that analytics role again. I have to make space in my wall behind me for Sabrina jersey. I got to make room for it somewhere. There's 3 teams in New York, and she has to be one of them behind me. Please talk just a little about that and maybe the significance of being a part of that team and doing what you were doing with on the league side back now with the team.
The Liberty, man. So once the COVID stuff started, my job with the G League, it just kind of fizzled out, I guess. Kind of finished up final projects, things like that, and that was it. Once I realized, okay, there's not going to be this opportunity again to like work for the league office for the WNBA over summer because like they're getting pushed back, the NBA is getting pushed back, all that stuff. Then I just started hitting up the network, like we literally were just talking about. Previously reached out to the director of basketball ops just to make a connection. And I mean, literally just put a packet of like work I'd done with the league office, stuff I'd done in my own time together. It was like, hey, if you all interested, I'll work for free. I'll do whatever. I'm just trying to keep from having like a big gap on the resume, basically. They came knocking again somehow. It kind of lucked out because like their GM now had previously worked like for the WNBA league office. So there was a little familiarity there. I kind of just lucked out too because like they were in like a transitional phase. I think the GM was maybe in his second year. They had just hired a new head coach, just hired in like, we're bringing in new staff. So they were basically like, hey, we're looking for help in analytics. We're young guys. Feel free to come aboard. Here's our logins, the synergy and stuff. Just throw whatever you want at us. Like literally that was it. Just a blessing. Cause like, they're both in their 30s. So like they have no resentment towards analytics stuff, anything. They were like, well, we want it all. Whatever you got, throw it at us. So that was amazing to just work that first season, actually have like a small hand in like the wins and losses, which I like desperately wanted to be a part of in some shape or form. I basically just kind of stayed in touch with everyone during the off season, during the winter season. We kind of just produced little weekly reports and stuff of here's how our roster's doing overseas, because everyone goes overseas. If you need me to do any college stuff, I can keep track of databases. So I just kind of did that just to kind of keep my name in the back of their head. And then once we got to training camp, they were like, we'd like for you to do a little more. We'd like for you to be basically an advanced scout. So that was what I did this past season with them. Obviously on the W side, smaller budgets, smaller staffs. So under the advanced scout role, like I was doing some video stuff, I was doing analytics stuff, I was kind of combining everything I'd learned in the past really into one job. How that worked, essentially I was like assigned 5 teams, so as say we play Phoenix on Sunday, they play Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm making sure that I have all their play calls analytically. I know exactly kind of what they're doing tendency wise and all of that. I'm just kind of shooting to an assistant coach. They devise their schemes and all that, pick and roll coverages off kind of some of the analytical stuff and the video stuff. But yeah, man, I'll be indebted to those guys forever, man, for just bringing me on like literally in the middle of a pandemic. That unpaid gig kind of transform into what it is now, like an advanced scout. Like I never would have dreamt like that would happen. So we just had the rookie of the year, man. 2 players on the all rookie team. The future's bright. Future's real bright. Excited to be a part of the organization.
Oh, that's so much fun. And this entire question just had me really jumping up and down because it's so much fun thinking about that this last year for you and that experience. The one, I mean, a couple of things really jumped out to me. One of the first ones was when you're talking about. I mean, you were staying ready. I mean, right? It was a free unpaid gig, but you were ready to go for them when they needed you. And that what I thought was so cool is because I don't really talk about this with a lot of guests in terms of if in the WNBA, right? So many of their players go overseas during the winter and play over in Europe. How are you getting that footage? Is it on Synergy? Like, I mean, I'm sure right, players going to all these different leagues. How are you keeping track of all that and giving that weekly report? I thought that was super interesting because I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, so not really video. It was more just stats and then kind of me. So there's like a site called, I think it's Eurobasket.com that is very bare bones, like when you go to it, but like it has box scores for every league in the world. So like, from the box score, you can kind of generate like things like 3-point rate, how many threes are they taking? How many twos are they taking? Mid-range, things like that. Excuse me. So I could kind of like pull everything out of the box score and put it in my own Excel and kind of generate stuff that we were looking for, specifically out of players and free agents and things like that, players that can maybe fit our system. But yeah, that was really all there was to it. It was just like a weekly Monday morning thing of this is what went down in Israel and Italy. This is what our ladies were doing. But that was it for the most part. Not too much video. It was more just keeping tabs on everyone and providing that so that the coaches and all that, they don't have to do that dirty work.
It's incredible though that you did that, right? Maybe not even asked you, but you did that. And then obviously it paid off with you being now a full-time advanced scout, which I think is so cool. This year, obviously you mentioned how the WNBA, budgets and the team sizes were a lot smaller. Were you still able to like, how were practices like? Were you able to go in person, try, or was it all totally remote once the season really kicked off?
Yeah, so I was never at practice, meet with like the coach that I was kind of assigned to. I met with her before the season just to kind of get a feel of like how you operated in the past. How can I make your life easy as we're going and you all are traveling and back to backs and all that. It was basically, yeah, all remote. I mean, it was Zooms, texts, phone calls, everything of how, anyone in any industry has been operating basically for the past year and change. I obviously would have loved to like been in arenas and been like the literal advanced scout, like getting play calls and 5 rows from the bench and kind of figuring out things that way. Watching games live on TV, picking up little things like Phoenix loves to run hammers, like they're a hammer team. This team loves to run this under 2 minutes. When it's like a close game, little things like that. Like you could still pick up on, just watching film. And so, this was a massive season for me in my own career. Just taking all this stuff that I've kind of learned over the years and being able to like put it all directly into like a scouting report that the coaches are going to look at, players are going to look at. It was just huge season for me. It was great to go from 2 wins in 2020 to the playoffs this year, man. It was cool to be a part of that for sure.
That's crazy thing about the transformation of the team in and of itself. One thing I want to mention is that I run a lot of hammer sets, so please don't scout. If you scout, you'll pick my team apart at Xavier if you start scouting my team. Don't do that. I know you'll find that out in a second. But it's so cool to think about, right? I mean, what the future might look like in terms of you, right? Whether it's being at games or hearing those play calls. I mean, that's just that environment of being 5 rows back, and that just sounds so cool to me. So that just sounds awesome. And thinking about all that, and I've been the winter seasons, all those overseas leagues is right around the corner, so that's going to be a lot of fun coming up too. One last thing though that I want to make sure I touched on is maybe the coolest just straight up title is you being the assistant GM of Hoop One Video. Can you tell us a little please about what that is? Because assistant GM is such a cool title. What does that maybe look like?
Once I got to Jersey, I realized one job is probably not going to cut it, living expenses wise. So yeah, man, I found Hoop One, which is kind of this like behind the scene. Like if you're a video guy in the NBA, if you're an assistant coach, an advanced scout in the NBA, you more than likely use Hoop One Video. We're like this very old school operation, and literally we're just recording every game. Like I'll go in tonight, I'll record every West Coast game quarter by quarter, and then people will just start downloading it from our server. And so like they can download the first quarter and then they can kind of cut it up however they desire, which makes us a little different than like Synergy and some of those other sites because it's just the pure raw unedited video. So you know, instead of having the pick and rolls or, you know, mid-range jumpers kind of picked out for you, like you can go, okay, here's our delays, you know, here's our pistols, you know, you can cut it up however you like. That I mean, I did basically like 2-3 months into moving here. I found that gig on Craigslist of all places. Like, talk about the universe, I guess, repaying me. That's kind of how I think.
So wild.
That's how I think of it, is the universe kind of repaying me for like 6 years of rejection emails. But yeah, I found it on Craigslist. And yeah, this guy, Mitch Kaufman, man, is just this old school. I mean, he's been around since probably the 70s, 80s, like the original video guy, and has just kept in touch with people. We're still around to this day, and it's wild, just like the operation. And yeah, I mean, as assistant GM, that's more just title more than anything. But yeah, I mean, I do everything for us on the West Coast. So like, I mean, I'll get in at 9:30 and get everything ready for 10 o'clock starts, 10:30 starts, along with the NBA. Like, we do NHL, we do everything CBS, we do college football. So just this big, all crazy operation that I do on the side just to make extra money, really, and stay involved in sports and the game.
I think that's so cool in terms of doing that on the side. That's a really, really, really cool side hustle. So I think that's just incredible. But overall, your story is so interesting. Both, I mean, we spoke about the early steps, of course, but the stuff you're doing now is just so. I mean, we just spoke about your side hustle, but obviously your main job with New York, like that is just all so cool. So I really want to appreciate you for coming on the show and sharing this all with us, because there's so much insight and such cool experiences here that it makes me excited to work in sports, if that makes sense. So really appreciate you for sharing all that, because this has really been an awesome conversation. So thank you so much, Keaton.
Oh, John, the pleasure is mine, man. I've listened to a bunch of your pods. Amazing to chat with you. Appreciate the invitation. It was a pleasure, man. It was really good to chat with you, for sure.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.